Hi everyone, I'm Scott Schneider. This is Stereo Niche. So I've updated the scoring list after the recent reviews, and so wanted to share that with you and see who's on top. Is it still the Pioneer TZ9 or is there someone else that's taken over the lead? Stick around. All right, so I have updated the list and my ranking of scores. So if you haven't seen my prior videos, I rank every speaker by 5 categories. That's the style, the imaging quality, and then the low end, the mid-range, and the high end, and I give it points for each of those, up to 20 points for each of those categories. So I've done that for this new series of speakers, and then I'm going to incorporate that into my current ranking and see where do these stack up. And so maybe there's a new top dog, we'll see. So stick around. Well, let's kick things off with the Adesso L810. So this was the first review I did after I released my last summary. So the L810, manufactured from 75 to 81, had a retail price of $650 a pair. It's a 4-ohm speaker with an 88 decibel sensitivity and a 3-way. So kicking things off on the points, it had a style points of 12, and I gave it 12, which is a point less because it has, with the grill on, which by the way, you need to run these with the grill on because the dome, mid-range and tweeter have a sticky coating, and it will attract dust, and you don't want dust on them over the long term. So it's a speaker you want to maintain and use with the grills on. So with the grills on, they're just not a stylish speaker. So for that, it got a 12. On to the sound side of things, starting off with imaging. Compared to the Advent, it has a much wider and much more full dynamic imaging quality about it. So a little more fun, than the Advent can do as far as the imaging side of things. So for that, it gets a 16. On into the low end on the bass side of things, it's more controlled, but it's about the same as the Advent. I couldn't say that they were drastically different. So I gave them the same points. I gave them a 14. On the mid-range, this is where it pulled ahead a bit. It's a beefier and smooth mid-range, and the voices are out front. So, for that reason, I ended up giving it another point in the Advent. I gave it a 17. On the high end of things, it's great. It's no brightness whatsoever. I think it's just very pleasing. It just does everything right here on the high end. So for that reason, it gets a 17, which is another point higher than the Advent. Total points are 76 points compared to 72 for the Advent. Now, take those points out for the style side of things, gets a 64. So we'll come back and take a look at that later. Overall, I called it a juicy steak for speakers. And that's in comparison to something like what I would define as champagne Christmas of like a Yamaha NS1000. So depending on what your flavor is for speakers, these have a place for those that like a more, I'll say full, a more juicy sort of sound signature. All right, the Adesso L710. So the L710 made same years as the 810 from 75 to 81. These retail for $500 a pair. It's also a 4-ohm speaker. The sensitivity I saw ranged a little bit from the beginning around 87, and it seemed to get a little more efficiency in later models up to around a 93 potentially. So that's why that varied a little bit. So in style, it really is the same as the L810. It's just a smaller footprint. So for that, I ended up giving it a 13 just because it has that smaller footprint. On the imaging side, fuller than the Advent, not quite as full as the 810 though. So for that, it gets a 16. On the low end of things, it just doesn't go as low as the Advent. Whereas the L810 was on par, this seemed to be a little bit less. And I even thought about, maybe a consideration of a sub. to supplement it. So for that reason, it gets a 12. On the mid side, midtones liked it just as much as the 810. They are, very similar drivers, if not the same, of course. So it still has that beefiness that I liked in the 810, so it gets 17 points. Same for the high end, no brightness, no shrillness whatsoever, so it got the same 17 points. Add everything up, comes in at 75 points overall for the L710. Take out the style, it gets 62 points. Overall, I said it was a juicy steak, just a leaner cut. The Nova 8B. Now, I said a lot of great things about Radio Shack back when I did the full review. If you're a fan of Radio Shack, you'd want to go check out that review. Radio Shack was the audio store for many of us because there were so many of them around. If you didn't have a dedicated audio store, then most of us had access to a Radio Shack. And so it was a place to go and see some cool audio. They had some very nice receivers and amps, but they had a fair good amount of speakers as well. The Nova was a series that they had for many years. The 8B came in at $280 a pair. That was their retail. And these started around 1976, and I think they actually went through the latter part of the 80s as well. But they were 8-ohm speaker, and let's see, I don't think I ever could find their sensitivity. So on to ratings for style, I had to rate them pretty low. I just don't like that lattice grill, that honeycomb grill that they had. To me, it just seemed dated from, day one. But I just couldn't warm up to it. So for that reason, I gave it a 9 on the style side of things. On imaging, I just felt it was all over the place. I couldn't determine any real separation of instruments. It just seemed muddled together. So I gave it an 11. On the bass side, wasn't unpleasant. I just didn't get excited about it. So I gave it a 12. On the mid-range, it was okay. It just wasn't exciting in any way. It got a 14. On the highs, they were muddled. They just weren't crisp, and it was extremely laid back. And so for that reason, I gave it a 13. In total, it got 59 points. And without the style points, it came in at 50. So in summary, I denoted that they were just not exciting overall. The one thing I thought about was that they do have the original caps in them, so I thought they deserve at least a recap to see if that addresses any of their shortcomings. So my plan is to do a recap of them and then do another review and see if they can be turned around here and be a more exciting speaker. I know that there are some fairly big fans of this series, so I think they deserve at least that opportunity. The Teal CS7. This was the top of the line model for Thiel from 96 to 99 and not inexpensive. They came in at $8,900 a pair. They're a 4-ohm speaker with an 86 decibel sensitivity, and they're a 4-way. So on style, I just couldn't get over how cool they were. They have a slant front. This pair has a teak cabinet, but when you take that grill cover off, they just look so futuristic. So the backdraw, the negative to them is they're heavy as hell. These things weigh a ton, was what it felt like. You have to have an extremely solid dolly. You're just not going to put them anywhere, right? They're 175 pounds on average, roughly. So not a speaker you're just going to put on a shelf, of course. So while you're dealing with the coolness, I have to also, the inability to put them anywhere, put them at a 15 on the style rating. So better than the Advent, but I had to sort of, I couldn't give them a lot more. I think they have the cool factor, you just can't place them anywhere. So they got a 15 for that. On the imaging, extremely lively, full imaging. The speakers themselves become part of the image, whereas most of the time, most speakers, the image is somewhere between the speakers. But with them, I felt like the speakers themselves became an instrument, so they're part of the entire image. So for that, they got a 17. On the low end, deep controlled bass. very tight, zero boom, just in command, of that low end. So for that, they got a 16. Onto the mid-range, I thought it was just smooth and subtle and just, very well balanced. It just blends very well into that tweeter, which is a coaxial. So things just work very well there. They get a 17. On the high end, speaking of that tweeter, it was almost like what tweeter? You didn't feel like there was this, this separate speaker driver really just, exploding on the high end. I just felt like I was thinking what tweeter, but it was there. All of the high end was there. It just was seamless. And so for that, gave it a 17. Total score, 82 points. Take out the points for style, and it came in at 67. My summary for them was it was fabulous presence. It looks the part and delivers the sound of a high-end speaker. The B&W CDM7. These were released by B&W and they weren't around too long, from 96 to 97. They retailed for $1,800 a pair. An 8-ohm speaker with a 90 decibel sensitivity, and they're a 3-way. So on style, I thought they have contemporary styling. They're a bit smaller than they appear in pictures. Small footprint. For that, I gave them a 15. On imaging, I thought it was mostly centered. It's more broad than the Advent, of course, but not as expansive as others, but still better than the Advent. So they got a 15 for that. On the low end, I always felt like I just wanted more. They just didn't seem to deliver what I was expecting for their size, and I guess the pedigree a bit from B&W. But I ended up giving the same score as the Advent at a 14. On the mid-range, I thought it was warmer and more natural sounding, especially with contralto voices. So I really liked the mid-range, on this quite a bit. So I gave them a little more than the Advent. I gave them a 17. On the high end, I didn't find it too bright. I didn't find it too dull. I just sort of felt it was just right, which is kind of what I feel about the Advent. I think the Advent does a good job there too. So I gave them the same score to 16. Add all that up, comes to a total score of 77. Now, take out the points for the style, and they came in at 62. Overall, I thought they were warmer to the B&W with sound signature, if you will, which is, most people think, a little bright, but I didn't feel that they were that way. But they sort of lacked the punch. I've heard some other B&Ws, some dynamics, I guess, was what I was expecting, just, didn't get there. So good overall speaker though. Well, the Altech Big Red from Audio Techniques. So this is a speaker that was sold really just directly to recording studios of the day, of the 1970s, the early 1970s. And for that reason, I couldn't find out, some other information like MSRP. But this particular speaker was bought from an individual who was an audio engineer for Columbia Records. So it was actually used in a recording studio. And some of the artists that came through there were some of the big names of the day. Unfortunately, I couldn't confirm, who those artists were. But if you go look at the full review, on there I denoted a website called reevesaudio.com. And if you go out there, you can see some of the artists that came through those studios during that time frame. I can't say for sure if these were used, with those artists, but they were certainly, in tight quarters at some point, I'm sure. So on to the rating here. For style, I just said they were just too cool for school. I mean, they're big red speakers, and they've got some cool history to back them up, and I just find them to be, kind of unique. For that reason, I gave them 15 points. On to imaging, they're very airy. They have a very big sound stage, but if you want to do critical listening and you want that the singer to be, right in front of you, you need to toe them in. And I felt like they needed to be dialed in a bit. If you're not doing critical listening, they fill up the room. They're extremely lively. They have a pretty good sound stage otherwise. and they're just a lot of fun. So for that, I gave them a 16. On the low end, man, they deliver. These things, they're very efficient to begin with, and they crank out the bass. I didn't find them lacking whatsoever. In fact, my first notes were OMG, because they were just, I was really, pleasantly surprised at how great they are on the low end. So gave them 18 points for the bass. On the mid-range, sultry, smooth, well blended transition from that woofer. So these are a coaxial point source. Make sure I get that right. Speaker, and they really do deliver a smooth, seamless experience because of that. So I gave them 18 points on the mid-range. On the high end, I found them pleasant, but I found them a bit laid back. Not, in a way that was so offensive or anything that I thought, well, I was missing a whole lot. But compared to other speakers, I just felt like they're a bit rolled off. So for that, I ended up giving them 16 points. Total score, 83 points. Now, take out the points for the style, and they came in at 68. Overall description for them, the summary was fun, dynamic, and lively. All right, so when we're taking a look at the new contenders that are going to be added to the overall summary, we take a look at just how they ranked. Audio Technique's Big Red came in at number 1 with 83 points. Right on its heels, though, the Teal CS7, heck of a top-of-the-line speaker, came in at 82. So hard to say. They're very unique speakers, different sound qualities, sound signatures for both, but extremely fun for both of them. I would say one is a fun speaker, have a great time with live, sound. The other one is that precision, critical listening type of speaker, from the Thiel side. So quite unique, but both have their fantastic qualities. The rest of the next three I'll say are pretty much very, very close. The B&W, the two ADS models, negligible difference in actual points there. A bit of, just personal preferences, I think. The Nova 8B, poor thing, it's way down the list here. It will be a miracle, I think, and a hell of a capacitor change to get them to really move up a dramatic way, but still going to try that nonetheless. Right now, they're very safe in their position there in last place. So looking at the other points, if we take away the points for style and only talk about sound, not a whole lot of change. There's a little bit. The ADS L810 moves up a notch, moves up into third place. Top place still is, Big Red CS7, still only a point difference, so very close. But the ADS 810 does eclipse the B&Ws there. And I think that's justified. They're a very well-rounded speaker. I think just most people would very much appreciate them. They don't do anything poorly. They do almost, everything very well. L710, right there with it. Just, a little bit, to me, to be desired when you're comparing it to the 810. So, which makes sense for a smaller sibling. No other change, of course, in the Nova 8B. All right, so this is the new ranking with total points. So the Pioneer TZ9 didn't get knocked off its perch with an 86, for its score. So maintains its top position, but not too far behind in second and third place. Here is the Teal CS7 and the Big Red. So not far behind at all. I think it's, showing that there's some top contenders here that would be pretty cool to, go head to head and see how they sound. But anyway, this is where total points rank. B&W CD-M7 and the L810 right down here, lower middle section, I'll say, with 77 points, 76 points. The Adesso L710 at 75. So pretty big grouping of the sort of mid-level speakers here. Bottom end, the realistic Nova 8B has a commanding last place position. Don't foresee that changing really, it will take a heck of a capacitor change to get that to move up. But we'll see. We'll see. I'm going to, you know, not say it's impossible, but right now it's pretty far back there. So this is the new list, the new ranking. Now, in the next segment, let's see how do they rank without the style points. Okay, well this is the new updated list without the style rankings. So not a huge shift from the prior ranking, except you see the Polk came back to its second position here. The Big Reds and the Teal came in third and fourth respectively here. Somewhat of a tight grouping though. The Pioneer at the top of the list here was 70 points. The Polk's right behind it, 69, then 68, then 67. So I think it's a nice grouping of the top. They, you know, have pulled away. We'll see how they stack up when we do a head-to-head comparison, though, of these top dogs, if you will. The mid-level, pretty packed. Points from 62 to 65. A lot of speakers in this. The L810, great all-around speaker, right in the middle of that pack. Not too surprised at all. The BMW CDM7 and the L710 from ADS, you know, right there with it, but just on the bottom end of that, you know, that strong pack. Pulling up the a very distant last place, which I think is going to be very safe for the little Nova 8B at, you know, 50 points, which we'll see if a recap can drastically change these speakers and it can move up, but right now it's in I think it's in a pretty safe place for for its location. But every time I do, you know, 5 or 6 reviews, I'll come in and update the list, and we'll come back and take a look and see how, you know, things match up, how they change, and talk through those. So we'll see how it goes. All right, there you have it. Not too many surprises from my perspective. I think I'm starting to see what I've kind of known all along in my collecting. I tend to generally only make sure I collect speakers I think are of better quality, but there have been those speakers that I thought set themselves apart, and starting to see some of that here in the rankings after I've gone through and, you know, done my reviews. Still have quite a few to go, but anyway, it's been interesting to see how things are shaking out. There are some quite different personality traits in the speakers, even though they're only a point apart. They certainly have their own unique signature, if you will. So when I start comparing those top ones together, going head to head, I think we'll see some things shake up a bit there potentially. Also, if you want to make sure you don't miss those videos, hit subscribe right now. Don't miss it. Don't miss that opportunity. Go ahead and hit it. Just check it off and get it out of the way so you don't worry about it. You don't want to stay up tonight thinking about it. In any case, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.